Jill, call us our roll, please.
State Controller Yee.
Here.
Mr. Keeley.
Here.
Mr. Rosensteel.
Here.
For the Director of Finance, Ms. Ortega. Chairperson Dillon, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Jill. Our first item is the approval of the agenda and the work plan. I entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any comments, questions, corrections? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Our minutes are approved. And the work plan. So all those. The agenda, work plan, and the minutes. Was that your motion, Harry?
Yes.
I might not have stated that when we
Items
started.
1 and 2.
Thank you. All right, so our first action item is the report and recommendations from the labor market compensation analysis. For the statutory positions, we asked for this research to come back to us, and Melissa, I'll let you tee it up with our partners there.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Dillon. So this item presents to the committee the findings and recommendations of the labor market compensation analysis total rewards review. As a reminder, the comp policy provides that the committee will review labor market data every 2 years. Although the committee has reviewed some positions' compensation incrementally over the past year, the last time the committee conducted a comprehensive review of market data was during the 2012-13 work plan year, which is reflective of a 4-year gap in your review of labor market data. Michael Oak and Akshay Patel are here to present the results of the analysis. Also participating via conference call is Bradford Klink. He is a partner with the Retirement and Investments with Aon Hewitt, and Paul Harris, who is Senior Vice President of Health and Benefits. Before I hand the presentation over to Michael and Akshay, I'd like to highlight some of the key parts of the report for the committee. It is included in Attachment 1, the report. The first part being the total rewards review. The committee had requested to include a total rewards review, including state retirement benefits and health, with the CalSTRS labor market analysis, which is the traditional base salary and incentive. The second part of the report includes evaluating compensation for the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief Financial Officer, which are 2 of the newer positions that have been added in the Education Code, and those positions are under the Board Salary Setting Authority. We will also be evaluating compensation for the General Counsel and Portfolio Manager positions. And then lastly, we'll be reviewing the CEO and investment management compensation positioning with competitive market. In addition to the report, you also have Attachment 2, which we've shared in previous evaluations, and it really gives the committee that internal equity view of the positions that are under your salary setting authority. You were provided also with an opinion letter from Luis Navas with Global Governance Advisors. That was sent via email, but I believe you've also been given a hard copy there for your review as well. Staff will be seeking direction from the committee on some key decision points. The first is setting compensation for the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Operating Officer, and also evaluating the General Counsel position and determining compensation for that position. And then next, determining base salary adjustment for the Portfolio Manager position. The insight that was provided for the CEO, the Chief Investment Officer, and the Deputy Chief Investment Officer, lagging total cash competitive market, does support further discussion, perhaps later this morning, when the committee considers topics for a comprehensive compensation analysis in the 2017-18 work plan year. Before I hand it over to Michael to begin the presentation, I would like to ask the committee's preference in receiving the information.
Absolutely.
They can, Michael and Akshay can present the report in its entirety for you, and then we can revisit and make some key decision points, or if you'd like, we can present the information, and when these key decision points come up, provide a natural pause for the committee to consider and ask questions at that time. So I will hand it over
pleasure.
to you, to Dana, to
Pleasure of the committee. We can go through the report by position and make those decisions as we go through the report. We can do the entire report and then go back and make decisions. We have 3 decisions we need to make, the COO, CFO, General Counsel, and Portfolio Manager. Pleasure of the committee. Go item by item. That works for me.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that? All righty.
Thank you. Michael?
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having us here. So as Melissa described, the report covers salary, total cash compensation, which is salary plus incentive, and then total direct compensation, which is salary, cash incentive, long-term incentive, and then also health and retirement benefits. So we'll walk through those, and if you do have questions, please do just jump in and interrupt. With this much data, a lot of it's new. It's better to get any questions resolved sooner rather than flipping through pages and then not following along. So on page 13, it says methodology in the top left. We assemble data from the board-approved policy comparator groups. So just as a reminder, for the investment positions, that includes leading institutional investors and mid-size asset managers, which is assets of 150 to 350. And for executive positions, that's a weighted average of 67% leading public funds, which is the same public funds included for the investments. And then 33% broad private sector investment management organizations, which differs from the investments because it includes all investment management organizations of all sizes and types. So moving on to the next page, the executive summary. I'll just go through these bullets if you haven't had time to review them, but I think hopefully they were straightforward. So the base salaries for the executive positions were below the competitive 25th percentile for all positions except for the CEO. The CEO salary was positioned approximately at median. When we factor in maximum incentive for CalSTRS, so salary plus maximum incentive, still positioned below the 25th percentile, again with the exception being the CEO, which fell between the 25th and the median. As Melissa mentioned earlier, a couple of these positions we'll comment on their pay positioning, but the acknowledgement is that they'll be reviewed at a later date. So from a total rewards perspective, when we factor in long-term incentives as well as benefits, if you're already at the 25th percentile, unfortunately your benefits don't make up that big of a difference, and we'll go through that in detail in a few minutes. And in fact, because we're including long-term incentives, that difference just gets wider, and again, we'll see that in more detail. So then again, we have recommendations for the CEO, COO, CFO position, as well as the general counsel that we'll cover once we get to the detail. A summary of the investment positions on the following page. Base salaries were generally at or above competitive median, with the one exception being the portfolio manager, which was just below median, so there's a recommendation to bring that up a smidge. Maximum total cash at midpoint is below the competitive median for all positions, and is most noticeable for the deputy CIO and CIO positions. And then similarly, as with the executive positions, when we factor in long-term incentives and benefits, the pay positioning is below median, and in fact, most cases at or below the 25th percentile. And again, that's driven not by benefits, but mostly by the long-term incentives. And again, we'll go through that in detail in a few minutes. Clear so far?
Yep.
Great.
I don't have anybody in queue to ask a question, so it must be clear to everybody else too.
Flipping a couple pages to the findings on page the 17 for the exec management. I won't repeat those because I just went through them, so hopefully they're fresh in your mind. So if you want to flip again to page 18, which is base salary versus market. There's a COO, CFO, general counsel, and CEO. Highlighted in the gray are the CalSTRS midpoint and the competitive median. And just so you know, the CalPERS is referenced at the bottom. That wasn't factored in necessarily. That wasn't a factor in our recommendations. We weren't trying to, we just wanted to have it there as an FYI, as we know it frequently comes up, what your peer across the river is doing for similar positions. So it's there for information, but that wasn't a factor in our recommendations. So as you can see for the COO as an example, the current CalSTRS midpoint is 148 versus the competitive market of 239. Continuing on to the CFO, current midpoint for CalSTRS is 148, the competitive market 226. General Counsel, current midpoint 205 versus the market midpoint of 233. And the CEO, current midpoint is 400 versus the market median of 404. So as you can see that the CEO is at median and the other three are below median and in fact below the 25th percentile for the COO, below the 25th percentile for the CFO, and just above the 25th percentile for the General Counsel. Questions on this chart? So as we factor in maximum total cash on the next page, COO of 170 versus the market of 346, CFO of 170 versus the market of 350, General Counsel 205 versus 416, and the CEO 720 versus right around $1 million. So next page goes into details about the benefits, which we can go into now, or we can go to the recommendation on the salary. It's kind of up to you because I know they're slightly different topics. I'll continue going, but if as I'm going through it, you
let's go ahead and go
say
through the health benefits because that would be the same for all the positions.
So what we did is we, in addition to having the salary and cash incentives, we then added to that the long-term incentives. So that will include restricted stock, stock options, mutual fund deferrals, cash deferrals, things like that, and of course retirement and health benefits were added to that as well. On the next page, page 21, it says total rewards. It says a detailed example for the CEO position. It's a very busy chart, but we promised you that we'd show you sort of the various levels of detail on how it changes by years of service and et cetera. So we wanted to show you, if you focus, for example, on the rightmost section where it says 20-year, and there's a CalSTRS on a market. This is CalSTRS minimum, mid, and max, and the market 25th, 50th, and 75th. So as an example, when we take from a couple pages ago, the total cash for the CEO was $720,000. If we add to that CalSTRS health and retirement benefits, we get up to $834,000. If we do the same for the market, but in addition for the market, we're adding long-term incentives, we go from that about $1 million number to 1.7. And again, that's almost entirely long-term incentive driven. The details aren't on this page, but I wrote it for my own benefit that of that difference for the I'll do the CalSTRS difference first. So the difference between the 720 and then the 8 for the CalSTRS CEO, 98,000 was retirement benefits, which includes retirement retiree health, and 15,000 was health benefits. So for a total of 113,000 in benefit value for the CEO position, and for the market, 84,000 in retirement. So a little bit less than CalSTRS benefit, 84 versus 98. Health was around 10,000. So again, less than CalSTRS for a total of 94. So from a benefits perspective, CalSTRS total was 113 versus the market of 94. So about a 20% premium in benefits. So the benefits are 20% above what the market are for benefits exclusively. But the reason why that number is well above $2 million is because there's $558,000 in long-term incentives.
Yeah.
And of course, that number goes down as you go into lower positions. But we just wanted to highlight that as you go back to that chart on page 21, if you're looking at the market, which is the blue bars, you see the base and the cash bonus and the long-term incentive, and you have these really tiny small bars on top. And you also have relatively small bars on top for CalSTRS. And effectively, if you're looking at a position, especially a position at this level of compensation, while the benefits do represent $100,000 or so in value, there's significantly more offered in the market for long-term incentives. So those bars become, you really got to squint to kind of make them out on this chart.
All righty, Michael, we have a question.
Yep.
Betty?
Thank you. Thank you for the overview.
Hang on, just for some reason I'm having a hard time getting you there. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dana. I just had a question with respect to
the data that you gathered from the institutional funds as well as investment management firms and insurance companies and banks. And I guess what I didn't see was just kind of more of an apples to apples comparison with just other institutional funds. And the reason I'm kind of interested in that is because it seems to me the bonus structure or the incentive structure is a little different with respect to private sector entities versus institutional funds. And I wanted to see if that was information that could just be pulled together easily so we can have more of an apples to apples comparison.
So the data in here, just so it's clear to everyone, is reflective of what your policy comparator group is, which is the combined group. But if you'd like to see the breakout, then we can follow up with the breakout.
Yeah, because I think there's, this is my impression, but with respect to the incentive structure, seems to me that, with respect to the private sector, the bonuses are lower in years that aren't in bad performing years, and seems like institutional funds have a little bit more of a shield when it comes to incentive pay. So I just wanted to see how that was factored in, if at all.
Yeah, so I guess volatility and pay would be a different potential topic that's not covered here. We actually do mention it briefly when we talk about some difference to market and why we only look at 10% difference to market. But as an example, when looking at like the CEO position and the difference in the market is 1.7 million. So clearly that if you asked us for the data last year and then this year and the next year and the year after, maybe it goes down to 1.5, maybe it goes up to 2, and it's going to fluctuate,
Sure.
up and down year to year. But that gap is still going to be very significant. So the year 834 will stay 834 and perhaps slightly increase over time, whereas the market could go up or down. And I guess I'd leave it for you to ask the question of, given that volatility, what is the appropriate gap to market? So you know that you can't match it every single year because the market's a moving target, but what is a reasonable gap, recognizing the market can go up and down, and that's what you're all here to determine.
So given that when we're talking about the volatility, a lot of that is the incentive. Would that be then part of what we are talking about possibly doing in our study next year? And Betty, what you're asking, would that be covered within that study?
That's my question.
So not fully aware of what next year's study would include, what you're looking at. I guess I'd say one of the reasons why you look at compensation every 2 years is because the market's moving and it does go up and down. So to some extent, you've already established and created a venue for assessing market movement and the fact that it does go up and down. I'm not sure if there's an intended piece to look at volatility and up and down for the next year, but if we can be of any assistance, let us know. We're happy to help.
We're definitely thinking about taking a look at the whole incentive program. And if that would Melissa, cover some of that volatility, we could get that wrapped up in that, correct?
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Sound like a plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So when we talk about that later, we need to have that be part of it. All righty. So Michael, where are we?
So, my conclusion on page 11, or my summary for, page 21, the total rewards. And I know that you've asked and discussed, when we look at total cash, oftentimes the topic of benefits comes up, and that we have great retirement benefits at CalSTRS, which is true, and the analysis shows that. But to us, the elephant in the room remains that $558,000 in long-term incentives, and how, if at all, so your current pay philosophy, which is what our recommendations are based on, is looking at market total cash, which is salary plus cash incentive. So now that you've kind of seen the direction of what the total compensation data looks like, to what extent, if any, do you want to factor that into your pay decision making in the future, or was this just sort of an informative exercise? On the next page, on page 22, what we did is we added the other positions in, and just to make the chart a little bit easier to read, is we just focused on the 20-year. So the 20 years of service is essentially the highest value across the board. So that would show kind of the that would give the most benefit to the CalSTRS number versus the market. And you can see here that the CalSTRS gray bars become really small and shrink. And again, that's driven almost entirely by the long-term incentives of the market. So as we move on to page 23 is where we have the recommendations start. The CFO and COO and CFO positions. The alternatives here, or the recommendations here, is that you would establish a range that gets salaries and total cash aligned with market. So those ranges, as presented on page 23, would be a minimum of 204, a midpoint of 250, a maximum of 296. And then with a 40% incentive opportunity, that would be 285, 350, and 415 from a max total cash perspective, which would then align those positions to the market total cash.
Alrighty, so before we start actually discussing the parameters of where we're going to go with base salary, Cassandra and I did have a conversation. She's willing to leave the room as we have that. Is Robin in the room? So I think that's this point. And guys, my mouse quit working. Thank you. It's a good thing we can do the touch on the touch screen over here, but I'd like to have my mouse back. Thank you, Cassandra.
I did want to underscore just on the note that Melissa made in the introductory write-up to the whole item, that just remember that we have this special caveat in the law that took so many years to pass. On these two particular positions, there is a handcuff of they can only have an increase of 10% initially, and then 5% like other state employees. It was one of those things we had to agree to. So it's rather unique. You need to have that overlay when you're looking at this proposal, that they're still subject to raises other state employees would have. Okay.
Could you repeat that for us, please, Melissa? It's the parameters of the
It is.
legislation?
Yes, it's what Jack said. It's what was approved. And so although McLaughlin has the recommendations for salary based on competitive market, if you refer to the actual item write-up, there is a recommendation from staff that we establish an interim base minimum salary of $199 to accommodate that 10% restriction that's in the that's set in the education code.
And we would find that on comp 7.
Yes.
All righty. We do have people that like to speak.
So that would be on comp 8.
Comp 8. Thank you. McLaughlin's recommendations are on 7, and then the parameters within the legislation's on 8, right?
Correct.
All right. Lorena?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, I mean, you all, I think, are quite familiar with our perspective on these compensation issues, but I wanted to make a couple of points. I appreciate the inclusion of the health and retirement costs. I think it's kind of glossed over a little bit in the presentation, but I think the point of asking for that information is that in the past, when we've looked at what the salaries are, the information would be presented as just like what the salary is. And there was, in my mind, always a kind of setting aside of an additional, I think on some of the positions, it's $113,000 in retirement and health costs that are on top of that. And I think that it's more fair to recognize that that's the actual cost of a position rather than just looking at these in the past, looking at the base salary. So I would encourage to always consider that, you know, that's the actual cost of a position, not just the salary. When you look at, I think it's comp 21, the way this information is displayed, it still shows this large gap as compared to the market, but that is, you know, and I recognize we've lost on this argument of the comparable, but it's because you're comparing entities that provide these long-term incentives that this system is never going to be able to provide. And I would say, I also don't think that if you look at other public funds, that's never going to be a realistic option. So to me, I still don't think it's quite representative to compare it to these long-term incentives, because the people who choose to work here are choosing to work in a system that does not offer those long-term incentives. And I don't think that that's the way we should really measure whether our compensation is appropriate. Does it compare to what you could get in the corporate environment? No, but that's not where people have chosen to work. So I'm open-minded to the actions that are coming up next, but I want to make that clear that that is still our perspective on compensation generally.
Paul?
So I have a question. I understand the handcuffs as Jack describes them, but that applies to only to base salary, or does it apply to total comp? Base salary. So the proposal, though, is to increase the minimum incentive comp from what looks to me like right now 18,000. I'm looking on page comp 23. It looks like the minimum base salary is 123 currently, and the minimum base salary plus max incentive is 141. So the minimum incentive is now 18. Am I reading that correctly?
The minimum, the incentive change.
Sorry. The incentive proposal would be 0 to,
I'm not asking for I'm trying to understand what the current situation is right now. As I read it now, the minimum, I understand the minimum incentive is 0, right? I mean, 0 can be given. But the maximum incentive for somebody at the lowest level is 18. And the people who are in this position now are at the highest level, right?
correct.
So their current maximum incentive comp is $27,000, right? The difference between 182 and 209?
Yes.
Okay, so their maximum incentive right now is 27. Under the new proposal, we would say that their maximum incentive goes up to 81,000. Is that right? From
Correct.
204 to 285?
40%, yes.
Okay, so if we go up to the maximum within the handcuffs, we would increase them 10%. And in their base salary, 10%. Their base salary is now
182.
182. So 10% of that is 18,000. So we would increase them 18,000, but potentially we would increase their incentive compensation by 54,000.
I haven't done, yes, but
Right.
possibly, yes.
So 54,000 is 3 times 18,000. So we're in fact adopting a salary and incentive comp system that would permit us, or Jack, because I think it's Jack's decision, to increase their total comp by 40%, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about when we've gone back 15 years, when any of these positions have left civil service, whether it be the position you just analyzed, or Chris's position, or my position, or any of ours, there was definitely the introduction of that incentive comp. It was a significant increase in pay opportunity. But again, the recommendation from the consultants is based on trying to find the balance point between the incentive and the base with the market. I think you did the build-up correctly, of course, but they're trying to show you one approach to get it comparable to the market.
Right.
But there is a bump.
But I also think there's
in bringing a position into this, there's no doubt about it. You're bringing them into a comparable framework that we didn't have before in civil service. So there's a change. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I think, this is I don't know the intent of the legislation that created the handcuffs or why the governor signed it. But I wonder whether, and obviously we can do whatever the law allows us. So if there's a way around that to basically convert a 10% pay increase into a 40% pay increase, and that's legal, we can do it. But it seems inconsistent with what the legislation may have intended.
Well, I think I could answer that honestly, but since I had to have that conversation, I mean, at least what I heard, I think there was a feeling, a concern just around how not just these positions, but all these positions potentially affect the pension and the defined benefit plan. And so obviously the incentive comp is not relevant to what's PERSable. The base salary is the relevant thing. And at least the comments expressed to me by by the key legislator involved in this activity was a concern that we not engage over here on any of these positions around spiking base salaries that could spike up pension payments. So the issue is more about the base salary and making sure that they're contained in some fashion. So it wasn't about total comp issue or whether you push more money to one side or something like that. It was really about the CalPERS benefit and making sure that the pensions were reasonable. I think we can appreciate that argument.
No, I think that makes sense, and I think what we struggle with here is on the one hand, to the extent we're in a position where we're competing for talent, we need to be competitive, and on the other hand, as Irena said, a lot of people took these jobs knowing knowing how the state pays and made that decision, and so to provide substantial increases that for people who are already in jobs where we're not having to recruit and where it's not predicated on a performance evaluation, like this person is, knocking the ball out of the park every day. It seems to me to be, we've got to balance all those things off, and I sort of see this comp piece as kind of an end run. I mean, I'm comfortable with the idea of saying, for current incumbents, let's slowly increase their compensation. Let's broaden the range so if we do have to recruit, we've got a more competitive range. But I'm kind of uncomfortable saying that we're broadening the range so we're competitive, and then we're giving current employees a 40% raise. So I might want to see some handcuffs on the incentive comp as well, but I'm just throwing that out as a possibility.
Irena?
Yeah, on the exact same topic, I want to just follow up with Jack on the question of, the legislation says the annual percentage increase in salary that may be paid, and that's how you get around the cap by moving the incentive pay higher. And what I don't know, and I'm not sure that there's any documentation of this anyway, but did people understand that saying salary means you're only capping the base pay increase and that anything was still on the table for the incentive pay? Or was there an intention in putting these caps to say an incumbent would not get more than a 10% compensation increase? That's for me, kind of what the question is what did people think that they were agreeing to? A cap on total comp or a cap on just the base salary? I don't know.
Well, I can't totally guess what everyone received on the conversation. I know for sure when Mr. Durman worked on the amendments that it was extremely clear that this was about a base salary calculation related to the PERSable issue. I know that, and I think they, and I can also represent that they know our compensation structure here very well and all the incentives associated with them. So I guess I'd be surprised there was a surprise, but the discussion was about the base salary and spiking. The issue was about explicitly spiking salaries, that the concern was from the legislator that people don't get dramatic base pay increases that affect pensions. That was the comment we were asked to address. And so I don't want to over-represent the conversation, Irena, but I know that was the point that was made, and and our way of addressing that was with a cap. So that's all I can say, answer to that part of it. I'm sorry.
To a certain point, that makes a lot of sense to me, knowing how concerned the governor has been about pensions and pension spiking, and really has not ever, at least to my knowledge, weighed in on the incentive program that we've had during the time that we've had it. So I would buy into the argument that it was about base salary and that the legislature, if they wanted taking a look at the plain language of the bill, if they meant total compensation, they probably would have said total compensation. A couple times it's been stated, and not just in this meeting, but prior meetings, that we have people here that choose to work here and they know they're foregoing other things. And I think recruitment's one thing, but I think retention is a whole nother thing. And when does it pay for us to actually value the worth of somebody staying? And just because they've come to work for the state and know the parameters of what they're working for within a state agency, doesn't mean that we won't lose them to private industry somewhere down the line. And if we want the best and the brightest to come here, we need to think about that too. Not just be satisfied that they're willing to stay. So I just had to get that out. All right, anybody else? Harry?
I appreciate my colleagues' comments and thoughtfulness on the topic. Especially Mr. Rosensteel, how you walk through the actual numbers that are associated with the proposals that are in front of us in the presentation. And I think on a going forward basis, I would suggest that, I don't know where this would be addressed or adopted, but when we are considering similar changes in the future, that total comp that's been quantified today always be included in our analysis. The real cost of positions. I think that's being intellectually honest about what the real costs are. So thanks for the work on that, that's helpful. So I think there's two issues around this specific item. One is do we want to go to the maximum permissible by law, which is a 10% increase for the base salary? And then the second, actually three, is then the 40% maximum increase, which is, do the math on that, what that number is. And the second part of that is actually how that, should we agree to an incentive, whatever that range is, maximum percentage is, it's currently recommended 40% of 200, how that would be quantified. So it's, do we want to agree to the maximum permissible by the law, the legislation, which is a 10%. The second is to what extent we want to have an incentive component to these positions. And if we agree we want some level of incentive comp, is it what's recommended? And then depending on the answer to that question is, do we agree with the recommendation on how that incentive would be determined? So I don't know if it's helpful in terms of process for us to address what may be the easier issue, which is the 10% permissible by law. Is there a level of comfort on a 0 to 10% increase in the base pay for these positions, and then talk about the incentive separately? I just provide that as a
Pleasure of
option.
The committee. Separate the base salary from the incentive. All righty. Reina?
I think I will withdraw. I wanted to make sure we were getting to the question about the GGA recommendation on the weighting of the incentive. So maybe that's for the next part of the conversation.
Okay. And Luis, that would be you. Do you want to come up? Yeah, come on up, because if we're going to talk about it and it's your recommendation, we'll have you talk to us about it. All righty. So that clears the queue. We need to have a motion to move forward on any type of change to the base salary. Harry?
So I'm going to, based upon the conversation and the commentary and what clearly is explicit in the legislation and what seems to be the understanding of people who worked on this, was that maximum would be a 10% increase for these positions. And I think the incumbents are deserving of that. And I think it would be appropriate to go to the max permissible by the current legislation, which would be that move to 198, which is a 10% increase in base salary
So that
for
would
those two
be,
positions.
that would be the placement of the current incumbents into that position. Are you actually moving the base salary range then? So would it be that 10%? And then what about the max? The max is on what the staff is recommending on comp 8, that the minimum would be 199,703, max at 296. So we can set the range and then place incumbents on that, all in the same motion.
Yes, it's on comp 8. It's.
But hang on just a second. Is that what you'd like your motion to be?
The base salary range as appears on comp 8. And the placement of the two incumbents to the minimum in that range.
All right. Is there a second to the motion?
Effective.
July 1st of 2017. Correct.
Thank you, Jack, 'cause I was definitely forgetting that. Is there a second to the motion? Hang on a second. Is there a second to the motion? So then the motion, no, you can't. And I would like to, but so we no longer have a motion on the floor. Paul?
I'd like to make an alternative motion, which is that we accept the recommended range on page 23, which is a minimum of 204, a mid of 250, and a max of 296, recognizing.
What page are you on?
I'm sorry, I'm on comp 23.
Okay, thanks.
Recognizing that under current law, under the law, the current incumbents in these two positions will be limited to
To the 10%.
to the 10%. And then that's Jack's decision. It's not our decision to set comp for these people, right? But we set the 204, 250, and 296 in case we have to go out and start recruiting tomorrow. We're not, our range isn't down at, 189 or wherever it's going to be with the 10% increase.
And
I appreciate Paul recognizing the actual McLaughlin recommendation. Because of the mechanics in establishing the salary through the CalHR process, and in recognition of the 10%, we would ask the committee to, recognizing that we are adopting the 204 min, but also ask the committee to approve an alternate base salary to accommodate the restriction of 10%,
Okay.
which would be 199.
Okay, so in other words, we would adopt the recommended range 204, 250, 296, and additionally a range for the current incumbents, that is 199,
Yes.
250, 296.
the figure that's on
Yes.
page 8.
And what we could do is, once the incumbents are within the range, we would go back to CalHR and request that they then adjust the salary to 204.
Okay, so that's my motion.
All right. That one's been seconded. All righty. So, Jill, are you straight on what the motion is? Is to move the range to 204, the recommended range for McLaughlin that is on page 23, but then to set the base for the incumbents on the figure that's on page 8. I think it's 199,761. Did I remember that right? 703, okay, thanks. I had the 199 part down. Alrighty, is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. And the chair votes yes. That motion passes. So let's move on to the incentive for those positions. Luis, do you want to talk about your recommendation on the incentive?
Probably easier for McLaughlin to go first.
Okay.
Direct, and I can.
Sounds good. Michael?
Yeah, so we have included on comp 23 in the bottom that the incentive would be weighted 100% to qualitative factors. I think this is similar to what was decided for the actuary position prior. Quite honestly, we don't feel particularly strongly about that recommendation. It wasn't something we dug deep into. So we would ask that you consider internal equity and how other positions are compensated, and listen to your primary advisor on their advice.
So that would be a maximum incentive opportunity of 40%, weighted 100% to qualitative.
Correct.
All right. Luis?
Sure. So our view, we're always very sensitive in terms of the optics of incentives. I think that's been a main emphasis of this morning's discussion, and frankly, it was also part of, I think, yesterday's discussion. And so, we certainly see in terms of market practice, there being some weighting for these positions in terms of having quantitative factors that are aligned to investment results. And we just are sensitive to the fact that if a stakeholder looks at a bonus payment, that it's being paid for meeting the pension promise. And so that's why we're suggesting that there be some weighting towards quantitative aligned to total fund performance, but not a huge or significant amount, but one a small portion of it.
All right. Are there any comments? Tom?
Okay. I have one comment, and it's just more an analogy to the world that I spend most of my time in, which is the business world. It's very unusual to have an incentive comp program that's 100% tied to qualitative factors and not at all linked to the principal effort of the enterprise as a whole. And so it would strike me as a little bit like scratching a blackboard to say that no part of their incentive should be related to the performance of the portfolio. Maybe it's a small part, like 10 or 15%, but otherwise there's a disassociation from the major benchmark or attribute by which the organization is measured.
But that's consistent with what we're saying.
Any further comments? All right, entertain a motion on the incentive. Paul?
On the compensation, on the incentive compensation. So I think we should do something that steps it up, just like we're doing with the base salary pursuant to what was put in the law. And so if we're going from a current right now of 204 down at the minimum level to 285, I mean that's a step of $81,000. I think we should do that in steps. Maybe we do it in over a 3-year period. You divide 3 into 81, and you have it go up by $27,000 each year, and then in 3 years you're at the top, or do it over 4 years or something like that, so that we don't provide the opportunity for an immediate 40% compensation increase in 1 year, but it does provide for the opportunity over 3 or 4 years for that compensation to grow. But I think it's consistent again with the idea that the limit on, I mean, we can all sit here and try to figure out why the governor and the legislature decided to put those handcuffs on, but I think it's a reasonable thing to say that you don't take somebody who's in a current job, and because you're trying to solve another problem, that you give them an immediate, potentially 40% increase in compensation. And part of it is if I saw that we were having a lot of people in this organization leave to go to the private sector, I might be compelled to think differently. I don't see that happens, and so I don't see that's an actual problem we face that we need to address. I mean, I just don't see the evidence. I'd like to know who those people are, because I think at the top levels, which is what we're talking about, that just doesn't happen. So, so I would recommend, you know, that it step up over a 3-year period of time, so that maximum increase in the incentive compensation doesn't jump by $81,000 in the first year, but it's 27, then 54, then 81.
And just a reminder, the current percentage on these two positions is 15%.
I'm not talking about percentage, I'm saying,
I know. I
I'm
just
saying that
wanted
the
to put it-
minimum, that we would be going from a minimum range, at the minimum, a max of 204 to a max of 285.
Understood.
And I'm saying we go from 204 to 231. And then in the next year, we go to 258. And then in the next year, we go to 285.
So just for the math part of it,
I know what
I
percentage those
understand
are.
that the dollar parameters you're trying to put on it, Paul, but if they're eligible for a 15% now, they go to I mean, what would be 15% of 204? That would be, wouldn't that put it over the threshold that you're talking about?
I'm just saying that
I mean, leaving the incentive exactly how it is.
So
Go ahead, Melissa. And then I have two people in line. Go ahead.
how I understand your proposal to be is similar to what we had in place, the graded in concept that the investment management positions had. And so the only thing I would add is we did remove that last year for investment management positions. And these positions would be the only ones that would have a graded in concept. And I guess I have a couple questions too, because we have the decision on whether there's going to be full qualitative or
And there's two decisions
a
to make
piece
within
of
that.
it being
whole incentive.
quantitative, which the quantitative piece would be derived, of course, by, you know, quantitative data.
Right.
The qualitative, as I know it now, it is 0 to 15%, but that's based on performance, and I'd have to go back and look at the previous year's performance, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the incumbents always reach
The
the
top.
max of that.
I understand that, but what we have is we have a policy that sets the max. And I'm saying that right now, the max is right now the max is 14,000. Right, for the two people who are in the, I'm sorry, it's 27,000, right?
Right.
It's 27,000. So right now, the current max incentive comp is 27,000.
Exactly.
And what I'm saying is, rather than go immediately from a max of 27,000 to a max of 81,000, that we should phase that in. That rather than it go from 27 to 81 in 1 year, that it be phased in. And now that I'm understanding this better, I think I need to phase it in over 3 years. We need to go up by 18,000 per year. So the current max is 27. Then we would go to 55, 45. Then we go to 63, and then we go to 81. So it would phase up to 81 over a 3-year period of time. 18,000 per year over 3 years. That would be my,
And you're talking about that being the incentive.
being the max incentive, right? The max incentive right now is 27,000. And rather than going straight from 27,000 to 81,000 in 1 year, it would go up in 3 equal gradations of 18,000 per year. So it would be 27, and 45, and 63, then 81.
Harry? Thank you.
So that's my motion.
Oh, all right, you're going to move that? All right. So, Harry, before you speak,
I'll second that for the purpose of discussion and clarification.
all righty, you go forward then.
So currently, just clarification, positions are eligible for a maximum of a 15% incentive comp. And is any of that 15% linked to the total fund performance?
No.
Okay. So a point on that, on a going forward basis, the recommendation, I would lend support to Tom's comments about incentives not being, any part of the incentives not being linked in some measure to the performance of the portfolio and the mission of the organization. So that for me is an area of concern. Some level of the pension, of the incentive, should we decide to have incentive comp changes here, has to be linked to fund performance. Paul, on your suggestion, I initially liked the phased-in approach because I just, the art of, how do you get to the art of possible, what's possible here today? I think it's pretty apparent what's not possible, at least to me, based upon the comments that I've heard. Maybe I'm looking down the road a little bit further than some of you, but I just see what may not be possible, given the comments that have been made so far. So I'm trying to find out what would be possible. And Paul's suggestion of a phased-in approach is one that I have more comfort with. Now, I just need to get to the understanding of the details of the actual implications of that. So Paul, currently 27,000 is the maximum incentive, which represents 15%. Your proposal is to phase it into a maximum that would get to 81,000. So 17, 18, 18, 19, in 1920, the fiscal year, right?
27,000 now, 45.
18, 19. Okay, so
Just whenever we get to the finish line, if there is one, we want to back this into percentages, just.
sure, yeah, we
Because
will.
that's the way we,
Yep.
pay people, yeah.
Right.
So we will. So which is, Paul, can I just, Paul, can you
Go
help me
ahead.
with this? When you get to the 81,000 in your scenario, what percentage does that calculate out to?
I don't know, because I'm looking at comp 23, which has ranges in dollars. So
Can
I don't know.
Can I jump in here just real
I
quick?
mean,
just
I
so we know
can
what we're
figure that
talking
out.
about? Because we're not, I'll write it down. We'll come back to it. Go ahead,
Can I
Harry.
help clarify?
Yes,
I think, so the 81,000 comes from the minimum salary of 204 and the difference between the salary plus maximum incentive, which was 40%, which brings it to 285. So 285 minus 204 is 81. So 81 is the result of the 40%
40%.
salary incentive recommendation. So another way to think about a transition, and this will be very close to those dollar terms, but not exactly, might be 20, 30, 40%. So
Exactly.
first year at 20, second year at 30, third year at 40, just something to, I know I'm not allowed to make motions, but something to consider.
That's fine.
That'd be a lot easier for all of us back here, because
that's
these
fine.
numbers
I was
vary.
gonna try to get back there, but we
That's
got,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah, if you just kind of
I'll
use
amend my
15
motion.
and 40 as bookends, what would that be? If you wanted that 15 and 40, what's the right
Harry, you good?
gradation?
I think for now, I am.
It doesn't.
All right.
So just 2 points that I won't support a motion that has incentive comp that does not have any of a percentage of it linked back to the total fund performance. So I'll vote against any motion that does
I
that. So I
didn't
want to
make a
put that
motion
out there.
with respect to that.
Secondly, no, I'm just saying that's where I'm at on, so I'm trying to get clarity and be clear with my colleagues as to where I would be on trying to get to the art of what's possible, and to the extent we can have consensus on how we pay people, that would be optimal. Second would be, I'm leaning towards a phased-in approach being a more appropriate way to do this. I think for us to do this all at once, I'm not comfortable with it.
Betty?
As much as I would like to, I don't think.
Thanks, Dana. I just want to get some clarification about timing. So we're going to have a more comprehensive review of the incentive structure as part of next year's work plan. And I would agree with the prior comments about having the maximum incentive opportunity be based to some degree, unspecified now, to fund performance. I mean, it's not really optics. I mean, the fact of the matter is contribution rates are going up, and we're in this environment where, we have to balance all of these needs. And so I guess, with the phase-in approach, we're still not grappling with the issue. That's still based on 100% weighting of qualitative factors, right? Because,
No, I'm.
or you're not?
The motion didn't contain the weighting.
Okay.
We
What
can go
So
back
it's
and
just the
discuss
math,
that.
just the
Right.
math in
It's
terms of
just
how
the,
we get there.
it's just the math.
It's just the dollar
We'll
amount.
have to have a separate conversation about the
When we
formula.
decide then, what the weighting will be, how will that be, I guess, overlaid on what we're deciding now? That's my question.
Go ahead, Luis.
I do just want to point out for the committee that if you do go in the phased in, that the bonus, there is a 1-year deferral on the bonus. So if you're pushing it out 3 years, it's actually technically 4. Just wanted to point that out, that's all. For
Say that last part again?
there, so unlike salary, which is effective, in this case, not immediately, but sooner, there is a 1-year postponement before the individual receives the bonus. So if you're looking at a phase-in, which is fine, just wanted to point out that if it's 3 years, it's actually 4 years.
So the first year they would be eligible would be when we hit July 18,
You'd be eligible, you just wouldn't receive any money in the bank for.
until July, that first year of the incentive.
That's all,
Alright.
I just wanted to point that out.
Dana, my suggestion would be maybe you close down the issue on the percentages.
We're gonna try to do
And
that.
then get input, like if you'd like a metric, and then on June, we could come back with dividing, if it's, I'm making this up, 30%. We could come back and say, well, of the 30%, X percent, we could give you different alternatives, and you can decide that. It's kind of hard to do this on the fly, make up someone's incentive structure. It makes me a little nervous that it's a little random. But given if there's interest in having the investment component part of it, and also you might consider, I'm just throwing this out, that doesn't have to be the same for both these positions. Clearly, Robin's position is much tighter to, and she has the investment accounting. So, the positions don't have the same linkages either. So, something to think about there. But I guess what would be helpful is maybe just decide the parameters today, and you did the base, so we got that done. And if you could set the percentage, lock that down, then we'd know of that percentage, how much you want qualitative and how much you'd like on a metric basis. That'd be my is that it, Melissa? Does that work timing wise? Because we're looking at a July 1st effective date on base pay and incentive structure. So we would want to decide it in June so that you start the measurement period in July with the metrics in place. But that's we remember. Does that help at all?
We'll find out.
Okay.
Betty, you good?
For now.
Tom?
Okay, well, so I'm just a fly on the wall here, but it does strike me, actually Louis said, made a similar comment, that we are setting up a system where we're chasing our tail forever on this, because by the time you get to the max, there'll be a new survey and it'll be under market, and you'll be trying to do this. That said, again, in the environment I'm most conversant with, 100% bonus is a very unusual thing. And I think if you took shorter time to ramp up the system, and instead established a system where there's a target bonus, which is what somebody could get if they had a really good year, at 50–60% of the midpoint, 50% of the max. And it would take an extraordinary year for the fund as a whole, and an extraordinary year where I'm not sure what extraordinary events would occur to justify the 100% bonus. To get the 100% bonus, then I think you'd find yourself making progress more quickly. So a system that says within the maximum, you have a target bonus, so you're winning if you hit target. And then if you win the Olympics, you get the max. You get 150% of target, I think that's an easier construct to work in than being in a system where the max is floating up all the time, and then you have a set of deliberations in the comp committee where you say, well, can we really give the max? Does that look right? Because they haven't done super extraordinary things. But again, that's just my suggestion, but otherwise I can see this being, you know, just a prelude to another conversation a lot like this very quickly.
Thank you, Tom. So Michael, I have a question for you. You rattled off some percentages. I shouldn't say rattled off. You gave us some percentages. So what were the percentages you gave us according to the dollar figures that Paul tossed?
So these weren't necessarily based on dollar figures, but would be close to it.
Close, that's fine.
So it's, you're currently at 15% incentive maximum. So if you wanted a 3-year phase-in period, I was just suggesting that 20, 30, 40 might be an easy way to get you there. That directionally is aligned with what Paul's dollar.
Alrighty.
I think actually my colleague here had done the math. 23.15% would be the exact number that Paul recommended, 31.325% the second number, and 40% the third. So 20, 30, 40 seems to be pretty close.
All right. I'd like to remind the committee that we have had a discussion about taking a look at our whole incentive program next year. And if we set something here, we could be just changing it next year. And we're going to change it, but I mean, it's entirely possible we'll change the whole structure of the incentive program. So I don't want us to get too hung up on what the incentive is now, because we could probably take a look at that when we do that whole study together. I'm thinking, and maybe I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but that might give us more comfort about where we're going and not necessarily have to set a parameter. We can set it for the year, throw it into the study, and then that could be part and parcel as we move forward into that study. So Harry?
So are you suggesting that we defer making a decision on the incentive changes at this point and putting it into the study for next year when we're looking, or no?
I'm not necessarily suggesting that, but I just don't want us to get too twisted
Got it,
on
yes.
how big a change we're making to the incentive.
Thanks.
I mean, if we're really thinking, if we're leaning towards what Paul was wanting to do,
Yes.
right now it's 15%, we add another 5, it goes to 20.
Yes.
We just set it for next year,
Yep.
and then we throw the rest of
Got
what
it.
has been proposed. And if we decide, if that's where that motion lands, then we can decide how we want to weight it or not, or we can throw all of that into the study for next year.
Sure, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let me ask the consultants, why didn't you use 50%? Why didn't you use 60%? Why the 40% as the incentive?
So the 40% is essentially backed into from the market median total cash to say your policy.
So
says
you were
we want
using
median,
yeah, right. Okay, so I agree with, I think our CEO, Jack, made a suggestion. I think it's a wise suggestion. And so I'm a phased-in approach. I think there's support for a phased-in approach. The mechanics, I think, are going to have to come back in June, give staff and folks to work on. So decision points that we need to, I think, come to is is there support for the phase-in? And if there is support, what's the percentage? And then directing folks to come back with a percentage of that being linked to the total fund performance. I'm comfortable, it's 15% now. If there's support for it, increasing the incentive percentage currently, my comfort level is increase it from 15 to 20% eligible in 17-18. In 18-19 go to 25%. and in the final year of the phase-in, you're at 30%. So essentially, the base salary has been increased, which is appropriate, and a lot of work went into that, and the decision that we've made today, I think, reflects the spirit of that law. I think an incentive pay increase that doubles the possible incentive component, possible incentive is more than reasonable, and I believe a phased-in approach is responsible. And I think it's an incentive for people to stay that are currently in those positions, I would hope. And I think it places the organization well-positioned to deal with recruitment without creating, I think, unnecessary challenges for some of us that would, by biting off too much too soon. So,
Alrighty, so.
does that make sense?
Yep.
I mean,
It absolutely makes sense to me. So let me lay it out where I feel that we are parliamentary. Paul has made a motion. It was seconded. We've debated it. Harry's offered another suggestion. So Harry, I'm going to ask Paul if he wants to take
Yes,
that as a
I'll-
friendly amendment.
It's a friendly amendment. Thank you.
and
Alrighty.
I'll second he's
He
withdrawing his-
agreed to you. You're
Yes,
good.
I've agreed
You're
to his
good.
Thank you,
motion.
Madam
Alrighty,
Chair.
so Jill, you with us?
Yes.
On what it would be? So it'd be 20, 25, and then 30 over a 3-year phase-in? All right. And then I think what I heard Harry say was that we would ask you to come back in June and give us a recommendation on the weighting within the 20%, or within the incentive range, what percentage would be qualitative and what would be quantitative. All right, does everyone understand what we're going to be voting on then? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay?
Nay.
Any abstentions? And the chair votes yes. Motion passes.
Effective July.
July 1st, 2017. Because he had that in his motion. We were good. We did that exactly right, according to Robert's rules. We did okay. All righty. Melissa, one of the things that was mentioned was that perhaps the two positions have different responsibilities as to the fund. And so would you consider that also? That that incentive, the weighting might be different from the two different positions? All righty, is there anything else that we would like to talk about on this position? All righty, I'd like to take a 5-minute break, and we'll get Cassandra back out here, and we can stretch.